This is also a time of change for my family.
The request itself was only a few lines long, but the moment King Charles understood what Prince Harry wanted, the atmosphere changed completely. Harry was not asking for another meeting, another reconciliation, or another private conversation. He wanted restored access to a restricted royal estate privilege, now controlled through William's position, and Charles immediately recognized the demand as something far more dangerous than a family disagreement. This was about boundaries, inheritance, and who still belonged inside the royal circle. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles read the request again, slower this time. The king reached the line dealing directly with William's authority over the restricted estate arrangement, then lowered the paper onto the desk and said nothing for several seconds. A royal estate in this context meant privately controlled land and residences connected to the working life of the monarchy, where access could depend on security, family status, and formal responsibility. That distinction mattered, because Harry was not simply asking to visit a familiar place. He was asking to regain the kind of unrestricted access he had once enjoyed before stepping away from senior royal duties. Harry had framed the demand carefully. He wanted renewed personal entry into a protected part of the estate, without being treated like an ordinary invited guest each time he returned to Britain. For him, the issue carried memories of childhood, family gatherings, and years when palace doors opened without question. But for Charles, those same doors now represented something else entirely. They represented security clearance, private family space, institutional trust, and the hard boundary between being born into the royal family and actively carrying its responsibilities. Charles finally looked toward the aide standing nearby and spoke with controlled anger. The monarch said Harry had crossed a line he should have understood long before putting the request in writing. His frustration was not only personal. If he restored the privilege, the decision could suggest that royal access removed after a major change in duty could later be reclaimed simply because of blood or history. The king understood how quickly one family exception could become a challenge to the authority now resting with William. William received the news with none of the fury his father had shown. The prince became quiet instead. A prince in this setting meant a senior member of the royal family whose position could carry public duties, property responsibilities, and expectations tied to the future crown. William understood immediately that Harry had touched something much deeper than a gate or a residence. His brother had challenged a boundary linked to his present responsibilities, and to wounds between them that had never fully healed. Harry's request carried one final sting. He was not seeking a temporary invitation. He wanted the same level of private access he had possessed before everything changed. Charles saw the implication at once, and William felt it just as sharply. Behind that demand stood an older confrontation, a private family gathering, and one sentence the brothers had never forgotten. To understand why one request could provoke such an extraordinary reaction from the king, the story must move away from the estate itself, and toward the three men whose unresolved wounds have now collided with royal power. Long before estate rules became the battleground, Charles faced a far more painful problem. Two sons who remembered the same family, but no longer understood it in the same way. William carried the burden of remaining inside the institution. Harry carried the bitterness of believing distance should not erase belonging. Their father stood between them, wanting peace but knowing that every concession now carried consequences, and that this latest request had forced him to choose where family ended and royal responsibility began. William understood exactly why the request could not be treated like a simple favor between brothers. His position tied him to royal properties, security arrangements, and decisions that affected more than family feelings. A royal household, in plain terms, is the network of people, duties, residences, and security systems supporting senior members of the monarchy. The prince knew that once access became connected to those responsibilities, saying yes could no longer mean opening a door for someone he loved. It could mean reversing boundaries created after years of change. Harry saw the same places very differently. To him, those estates were not merely controlled properties or protected spaces. They carried childhood memories, family gatherings, private conversations, and moments from a life that existed long before titles became weapons between brothers. Speaking privately with a trusted representative, he insisted that stepping away from official duties should not erase every connection to the places that had shaped him. He believed distance from royal work had been turned into distance from family itself. William later sat with Catherine and admitted the trap he could already feel closing around him. Saying yes would make years of difficult decisions look meaningless. Saying no could make him appear cold, bitter, even personally vindictive toward his own brother. Catherine listened carefully, and the princess understood why his silence carried more pain than anger. William was not simply defending a rule. He was trying to protect his responsibilities, without allowing those responsibilities to destroy whatever remained between them. Charles noticed something even more troubling when he studied the wording again. Harry had not framed the request as nostalgia. He had referred instead to older access arrangements that had existed when both brothers still operated within the royal household. The king recognized the distinction immediately. His younger son was not asking merely to be welcomed back for a visit. He was building an argument that past privilege had never truly disappeared. William caught the same detail, and it unsettled him deeply. Harry appeared to be claiming not hospitality but entitlement, something connected to being the king's son rather than to holding an active royal role. That difference changed everything. The prince could accept that his brother still belonged to the family. What he could not accept was the idea that birth alone should automatically restore privileges attached to responsibilities Harry no longer carried. The tension now pointed backward toward one forgotten moment. Months earlier, Harry had challenged this exact boundary during a private family gathering, and William had answered him with a sentence neither brother ever forgot. The present crisis suddenly becomes impossible to understand without returning to the night when Harry first challenged the limits placed around him, and William finally refused to move them. Every royal rupture has a moment that later seems inevitable. In this dramatized story, theirs came during a private gathering at Windsor, when Harry made what sounded like a simple request, and William answered with a sentence neither brother forgot. There were no cameras, no public statement, and no dramatic announcement. Just a closed room, two brothers carrying years of resentment, and a disagreement over access that quietly became the point of no return. Harry had already learned that returning to Britain no longer meant moving through royal spaces as he once had. After stepping away from senior duties, his entry into certain private areas required advanced coordination, meaning permission and security planning had to be arranged before he arrived. William believed those limits were practical, not cruel. The prince wanted clear boundaries around private family areas, because responsibility had shifted, security expectations had changed, and informal habits from the past could no longer simply continue. Harry refused to see it that way. During the Windsor gathering, he turned directly to his brother and asked whether he could still enter a restricted estate area without advance clearance whenever he was back in the country. The question sounded simple, but both men understood the weight behind it. For Harry, the answer would reveal whether he still belonged. For William, it would reveal whether his brother accepted that royal privilege could not survive unchanged after royal responsibility had been left behind. William answered carefully, but the words landed like a blow. Not anymore. Not without agreement first. The prince did not raise his voice. He did not insult his brother. Yet Harry pushed his chair backward and stared across the room as though something much larger had just been taken from him. He heard rejection, where William believed he had offered procedure. The future king saw a boundary. Harry saw a family door closing. Charles learned about the exchange later through a documented account prepared after the gathering. The king understood immediately that he could still intervene, but he chose not to overrule William. That silence mattered. A sovereign, in plain language, is the reigning monarch whose authority can shape decisions across the royal household. By refusing to reverse his elder son's position, Charles quietly turned a dispute between brothers into a boundary carrying the weight of the crown. Harry left Windsor, convinced that William had used his growing authority to redefine his place inside the family. The prince left the same encounter, believing his brother still wanted the privileges of royal life, without accepting the obligations attached to them. Neither man felt understood. Neither forgot what had been said. Months later, Harry returned with something far more dangerous than anger. His formal request now asked Charles to reverse the very decision the king had once allowed to stand. And when Charles finally realizes that Harry is asking him to overturn William directly, the disagreement stops being historical and becomes a confrontation that can no longer be postponed. Charles could have answered through officials. He could have returned the request unsigned or allowed advisors to deliver a carefully polished refusal. Instead, in this fictionalized scenario, the king chooses something much more dangerous: a direct conversation. When Harry enters the private room, there are no microphones, no statements, and no advisors sitting between father and son. Within minutes, the dispute over an estate becomes a reckoning over loyalty, sacrifice, and what Harry believes was taken from him. Charles dismisses the aides before Harry sits down. The king wants his son to hear the decision first as family, not through the language of royal administration. A royal advisor, in simple terms, is someone who helps the monarch handle official decisions, communication, and procedure. Removing them strips away that protection. Harry understands the significance immediately, but he does not retreat. He believes his request concerns family history, childhood access, and a place he once entered without questioning whether he still belonged. Charles places the request between them and asks the question he has been holding back. Why had Harry demanded access under terms connected to William instead of simply asking for an invitation? The king keeps his voice controlled, but the anger beneath it is clear. Harry answers without hesitation. He says he will not ask his brother for permission to enter places where they once stood as equals. To him, doing so would mean accepting that childhood itself had been rewritten. Harry watches his father's expression harden. Charles tells him that equality in childhood does not erase responsibility in adulthood. The monarch reminds his younger son that William now carries duties tied to security, property, succession, and the future crown. Succession, in plain language, means the order through which the throne passes from one monarch to the next. Charles insists that these responsibilities cannot be treated like personal weapons simply because the men carrying them are brothers. Harry finally reveals the part he had deliberately kept buried. In a recorded conversation from the private meeting, he states that he bypassed William on purpose because he believed his father still had the authority to restore the privilege regardless of the prince's objections. The confession changes the room instantly. Charles realizes this was never only a request for access. It was a direct test of whether the king would overrule the future king. Charles refuses. He tells Harry that using the crown to weaken William's authority would damage the very succession he is responsible for protecting. The king's anger now carries something heavier than frustration. It carries fear that one act of favoritism could reopen every unresolved wound between his sons. Harry does not back down completely. He offers one final argument, quieter than the others, and far more dangerous. He says the late queen once made a promise about family belonging that none of them had the right to erase. That claim forces Charles to examine something far more dangerous than Harry's anger. Whether the past can still create obligations the present monarchy cannot afford to honor. The argument now moves beyond emotion because royal access is never simply about who possesses a key. Behind every private entrance sits a web of responsibility. Ownership structures, security arrangements, household authority, constitutional position, and family convention. Harry believes his father can simply say yes. William believes the decision touches responsibilities that cannot be overridden casually. Charles is caught between them, discovering that the true question is no longer whether Harry may enter, but whether royal power should ever be used to settle a family wound. Charles receives the briefing with growing unease. The restricted area at the center of the dispute is not ordinary public royal property, but a private estate zone connected to William's present responsibilities. In this context, household authority means the power to manage access, staff, security, and private arrangements around senior royals. Restoring Harry's old privileges would therefore require more than a father's approval. Security procedures would need to change, and he could receive treatment unavailable to other family members who no longer perform senior royal duties. William enters the private meeting expecting a simple confirmation that the existing boundary will remain. Instead, the prince notices his father hesitating. Charles listens as officials explain procedures, but his attention shifts when the discussion touches the years when both sons moved through those same places without formal permission. William recognizes the look immediately. The king is no longer thinking only about rules. He is remembering two boys who once believed the same doors would always open for both of them. Charles closes the briefing folder with a sharp movement. He admits that he hates turning family relationships into written boundaries and formal permissions. The monarch knows why the rules matter, but he also understands what they symbolize. Every new restriction makes the distance between his sons feel more permanent. William hears the pain in his father's voice, yet the future king refuses to let that pain erase what has changed. A senior household official confirms the uncomfortable truth through a documented briefing. Charles can authorize a specific visit whenever circumstances allow. A personal invitation would mean Harry could still return as family. Permanent unrestricted access, however, would mean something much larger. It would suggest that privileges attached to an earlier royal role could survive even after the responsibilities behind them had disappeared. William chooses his words carefully. He tells Charles that he would accept Harry being invited personally, and would not stand in the way of genuine family contact. But the prince cannot accept his brother walking back into restricted areas under the same terms as before, as though years of separation and institutional change had never happened. Charles finally makes his choice. He will preserve the boundary while leaving the family door open. But before Harry receives that decision officially, someone inside the family tells him exactly what William said. What should have remained a private decision now reaches Harry stripped of context, and the way he receives it turns disappointment into something far more personal. Harry does not shout when the answer arrives. That makes the moment worse. He reads the wording once, then again, lingering over the sentence confirming that his former unrestricted access will not be restored. The king has chosen the boundary. William has not been overruled. For Harry, the decision feels painfully simple. His father has defended the future monarch over the son standing outside the institution. But buried inside the refusal is one detail he never expected. Harry lowers the page slowly and walks toward the window without speaking. The formal decision means his previous automatic estate access will remain withdrawn, although individually approved family visits are still possible. In plain language, unrestricted access means being able to enter under standing permission rather than requesting approval each time. Charles has drawn that distinction deliberately. The king wants Harry to understand that being welcomed as family is not the same as holding privileges connected to active royal responsibility. Harry turns back toward his representative and finally speaks. He says he never asked to become a guest inside his own family history. The words carry more hurt than anger. To him, the estates are tied to childhood, memory, and belonging long before royal roles became divided. Yet the refusal forces him to face a colder reality. The places he remembers emotionally are now governed by responsibilities, security systems, and authority that no longer include him in the same way. William hears soon afterward that the decision has been delivered. The prince feels relief, but there is no victory in it. Catherine notices immediately. She watches him sit in silence before he admits that he never wanted his relationship with Harry reduced to permission lists, access rules, and official boundaries. The princess understands the contradiction. William believes the decision is necessary, yet every necessary rule seems to confirm how far the brothers have fallen from the ease they once shared. Harry returns to the final paragraph and notices something he missed the first time. Charles has personally added a sentence offering him a private visit to the estate, under mutually agreed arrangements. The king has not restored the old privilege, but neither has he closed the family door. The message is painful but clear. The institutional boundary remains, while personal contact is still possible. Harry surprises everyone by not rejecting the offer. Instead, he asks one question: will William be there? Charles receives that answer and immediately understands what has changed. The dispute is no longer really about entering a restricted estate. His younger son is asking for a confrontation with the brother whose authority he tried to bypass. The king quietly arranges the meeting with one condition: no officials, no written arguments, and no royal machinery between them. For the first time, the gates and titles fall away, leaving only William and Harry, and a conversation they have avoided for far too long. No advisor enters with them. No private secretary takes notes. No father sits between them. William and Harry finally face each other without the institution absorbing the impact of every sentence. The forbidden estate access is still the reason they are there, but within minutes, both men realize it was never truly the heart of the conflict. One brother believes he was pushed outside. The other believes every boundary he created was interpreted as punishment. Now neither can hide behind procedure. William agrees to the meeting because Charles has forced him to confront something uncomfortable. Rules can settle who enters an estate, but they cannot repair what those rules have come to mean. The prince understands that distinction before Harry arrives. A private secretary, in simple terms, is a senior aide who helps organize royal business and communication. But William has asked for none to attend. He wants no official record standing between them. Harry notices that immediately, and some of the anger he brought into the room begins to soften. Harry speaks first. He tells his brother that being required to ask permission makes him feel as though his childhood has been confiscated, along with his former role. He is not talking about gates anymore. He is talking about memory, belonging, and the fear that every place connected to his earlier life now comes with conditions. William listens without interrupting, but the future king does not surrender the point. He tells Harry that family access and institutional privilege are not the same thing, and pretending they are creates consequences for security, responsibility, and everyone expected to follow those rules. William then says something Harry clearly does not expect. He admits he never asked Charles to ban his brother from visiting. The prince explains that his objection was always to permanent, unrestricted access, not to Harry entering his family under agreed arrangements. That distinction lands heavily. For months, Harry had convinced himself that William wanted him shut out completely. Now the future king is telling him that the real boundary was narrower and far less personal than he believed. Harry finally gives something back. Through the private conversation, He admits that bypassing William and appealing directly to Charles was partly deliberate. He wanted to test whether his brother's authority could be overturned. The admission hurts, but it also clears away the last illusion between them. William sees the challenge for what it was. Harry sees the damage that challenge created. The brothers do not suddenly reconcile. Too much history remains between them for that. But Harry agrees to abandon his claim to automatic access, while William accepts that family visits should never be treated as victories or defeats. Then the private decision leaks before the palace can prepare for it. The private battle may finally be cooling, but outside those walls the story has already exploded, and Britain is about to decide what it believes the confrontation really means. By morning, a private argument about access has become something much larger. Commentators debate privilege, exile, brotherhood, and royal authority as though one locked gate contains the entire history of Harry and William's fractured relationship. Supporters see cruelty. Critics see consequence. Yet one image captures the national mood more powerfully than any panel discussion. A small crowd outside Windsor, divided between sympathy for the younger prince and support for the boundary Charles refused to erase. Harry watches the coverage with growing frustration. Palace communications confirm only that private family arrangements will remain private, and that existing property and security protocols have not changed. A palace communication, in simple terms, is an official message used to clarify the monarchy's position without revealing private family details. The careful wording protects Charles and William from saying too much, but it leaves Harry watching strangers reduce something deeply personal into a public argument about entitlement. William feels the pressure from the opposite direction. The prince sees headlines portraying him as the brother who locked Harry out, and the phrase cuts harder, because it ignores the private conversation that had finally softened the dispute. Catherine notices his anger immediately. He tells her that nobody seems interested in the difference between banning someone from family life and refusing to restore permanent privilege. The princess understands why that distinction matters. William had accepted future visits. What he refused was pretending nothing had changed. Public reaction becomes impossible to ignore outside Windsor Castle. One supporter holds a handwritten sign reading, "Family is not a title." Several feet away, another person raises one saying, "Duty has consequences." The two messages capture the entire conflict in a few words. Harry has become the symbol of those who believe blood should survive institutional separation. William has become the symbol of those who believe privilege must remain tied to responsibility. Harry watches that moment replay across broadcasts and feels the story slipping further away from what he meant. He had spoken about childhood, belonging, and loss. Now the country is arguing about rank. William sees the same coverage and realizes the opposite danger, that defending a boundary can look identical to rejecting a brother when the private reasons remain unseen. Then the palace makes one crucial clarification. Harry remains welcome at family gatherings when invited, but his former automatic estate privilege will not be restored. The statement does not humiliate him, and it does not weaken William. It draws the exact line Charles had been trying to preserve from the beginning. Charles understands that another statement will not finish this. The king has allowed officials, headlines, and public reaction to carry the dispute as far as they can. Now he calls both sons back. The controversy began with who could pass through a royal gate, but its final meaning will be decided behind another closed door, where Charles must define what belonging now means. Charles cannot restore the family they once were. William cannot pretend his responsibilities have not changed. Harry cannot demand that every privilege of his former life survive every decision that followed. And so the king ends the dispute not by choosing one son over another, but by drawing a distinction none of them can escape. Family ties may survive separation, anger, and distance, but royal authority cannot be treated as proof of love. For the first time, all three men accept what that means. Charles brings both sons together privately and makes the final decision unmistakable. Harry's former unrestricted estate access will remain withdrawn, and the arrangement will not be reconsidered. The king also makes clear that individually agreed family visits remain possible. In simple terms, active royal responsibility means the official duties, security obligations, and institutional expectations carried by working members of the monarchy. Charles separates that responsibility from family belonging because he refuses to let access to property become the measure of whether his younger son is still loved. Harry listens without interrupting. The silence carries more weight than any argument they have already had. When Charles finishes, he admits that the deepest wound was never really losing entry to an estate. What hurt was believing the restriction proved he had lost his place in the family itself. The king hears the difference at last. Harry is no longer fighting only for a gate to open. He is trying to understand whether the emotional world behind that gate still has room for him. William answers without triumph. The prince tells Harry he never wanted his brother erased, and he never wanted family visits turned into humiliating exceptions. He only wanted the boundaries created by their different choices to be respected. Harry hears something in that answer he had resisted for months. Disagreement is not the same as rejection. William hears something too. His brother's anger had always carried grief beneath it. Harry finally withdraws his attempt to reclaim automatic access. He accepts that future visits will happen through personal agreement rather than permanent entitlement. William, in return, agrees that those visits should never be treated as political concessions, victories, or signs that one brother has defeated the other. The future king wants the arrangement to remain what it should have been from the beginning: family contact, not a royal contest. Charles ends the discussion with a boundary firmer than anger. The monarch tells both sons that royal procedure will never again be used as a test of affection between them. His fury has settled into resolve. He will protect William's authority, but he will not allow that authority to become a weapon against Harry. He will protect Harry's place as his son, but he will not restore privileges simply because memory makes losing them painful. The forbidden access becomes the symbol of a larger truth. Harry remains Charles's son and William's brother, but family belonging no longer guarantees the privileges of serving the crown. William's position survives without demanding Harry's total exclusion. Harry accepts that memory cannot override present responsibility, and Charles finally stops trying to make royal duty erase personal consequences. There is nowhere else for the dispute to go. The access remains restricted. Harry accepts the decision. William's position stands, and Charles closes the matter with a painful but definitive principle. The family door can remain open, even when the royal gate does not. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.